All right, welcome to the Mistake-Free Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Marck, and I'm super excited to have a good friend of mine and SBD investor Dwayne Saucier joining us today. Dwayne, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. So, hey, for those that don't know you, give us a little bit of background. Where do you live? Tell us about your family and what you do for a living.
Yeah, my name is Dwayne Saucier. I'm originally from Lee Summit, Missouri, and I still reside in Lee Summit, Missouri. I have a beautiful, lovely wife, Jenna Saucier, and three great kids. Savannah's 12, Zach's 10, and Juliana Jo is 7. And I've been in the insurance industry for the last 20 years now, and I work for a company called RT Specialty, and we're known as a wholesale broker. So what that entails is we specialize in executive and professional liability products on a niche basis to help our customers out with their insurance needs and risk management services.
So how has that been affected by COVID-19? Has that been something that has, truly had a massive impact, or is it more business as usual for you?
I would say the insurance marketplace in general was we call it hardening. When the market hardens, the marketplace was kind of going that way to begin with. And so then when COVID hit, that really just gave it another extra push into that hard market, if you will. And what that entails is more restrictive terms and conditions, higher premiums, tougher to get pieces of business in place. We do have some carriers that are non-renewing certain classes of business, but we've also used it as an opportunity where we've actually insured some testing facilities, some COVID testing facilities. So that's nice to do. And then also we've picked the ball up where other competitors have dropped that and helped our clients out to pick up new business as well. So we've really taken it as an opportunity, if you will.
Very cool. Well, hey, look, insurance is about as boring topic as it comes, right? And I know that you probably agree with me on that, but I know what you love to talk about is real estate. Tell me a little bit about your background. For those that don't know you, share a little bit, and then we'll dive deeper. But share a little bit about, what does real estate mean to you? What have you done with real estate recently, and what stage of your real estate investing career are you in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably, with respects to real estate, it's always been a fascination of mine, and that goes back to growing up and then owning your first home, if you will, and then trying to build upon that. And it started out very basic. And when I say that is you own a home at a college, and then you try to, build a base or build a foundation, and then go and build it from there. And then once you kind of get out of, at least for me, when you get into that rut, if you will, where you buy a house, you make your mortgage payment every month, and you just think to yourself, hey, in 20 years, I'm going to own this home outright. Well, that's a process that takes a long time. And it's not easily bucked. And when I say that is, a lot of people just stay on that 15, 20-year path, which is great for the banks, but not the individual. So light bulb went off in our head to where, you know what, let's get out of debt of our house as soon as possible. And then by doing so, we were able to use that money within a home equity line to really build our portfolio of real estate properties with the help of SBD housing.
Sure. So little background, Dwayne, obviously living in Lee Summit, I met Dwayne as a fellow golfer. So he and I, start off as a friendship. So I meet, our clients in many different avenues. Dwayne was a friend before he became a client. In fairness, it is sometimes challenging to work with friends, but Dwayne and Jenna, who are very good friends of ours, have always been, totally pros, total professionals, keeping the business and the personal, effectively separate. So yeah, the intro to Dwayne and Jenna, I think it would be fair to say, Dwayne, we never pushed it upon you, but you always were probably looking at us from afar and saying, man, all these houses you're buying, this looks like it's doing pretty well. And you and I would always have, casual conversation over beer. What was the moment that you said, look, I need to do more with real estate? What kind of put you over the edge as far as thinking, maybe I should, or maybe I could, start investing myself. And was it the realization perhaps that you could do it without having to be involved? Was that the hurdle you had to overcome? Was that, look, I don't want to be getting the calls at 9 o'clock at night that your toilet's blocked? Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. And growing up, my dad owned a construction company, so I was pretty handy. But then it got to the point where we were talking about maybe doing some real estate properties and managing and buying those. And then it got to the point of, do I really want to, like you said, take that phone call at 9 o'clock at night? Do I want to be spending my weekend away from my family, having to redo a floor or do some handiwork when, I should be doing that in my own house? So it always been on the forefront of our minds of diversifying, because at that time back in 2000, I think it was 14, we were the average investor. All of our money was in the stock market and 401ks and, retirement plans of that nature. So what really spurred us was to make the jump. It's really, how do I explain this better? It was one of those, the opportunity was present with SBD, and we could see that you guys were buying properties, good quality assets. And it felt for me and Jenna that if we didn't engage that process right then and there, we were going to miss an opportunity, a big one. And so it really came out of a factor of, hey, we need to do this right now. Otherwise, we're going to miss a huge opportunity. And then, looking back 6 years later is the best thing we've ever done. And I see that a lot with our friends and other, clients and people I talk to about my company. I always get me and my wife, we've talked about that, but they never really pull the trigger. And I mean, that is the statement that you hear a lot. Yeah, we talked about it. We should have done that a long time ago. And so it's really about pulling the trigger and doing, actually engaging and actually buying the properties.
Just doing it, right? I mean, that's the hardest part, is making that big commitment.
Correct.
Can you remember, think back to that first one that you bought. You're laughing already.
Yeah.
Think about the first time that you had to pull the trigger and buy a house compared to the way you buy them now in 2020. And to your credit, just so everyone knows, you're a very consistent buyer. You're picking up, 3, 4, 5 properties a year, as you get, assuming bonuses or pay that comes down the pipeline. You're really reinvesting and still engaging in the process. But talk a little bit about the first purchase and the intrepidation compared to maybe the process that you go through now.
Yeah. Our first purchase was, and I could probably look at the date, but it was in October of 2014. And Mark and I were sitting in the parking lot of the Royal Stadium before a playoff game against the Toronto Blue Jays. I think it was the American League Championship Series. And Mark said, "Hey, I got a home run for you. It's a duplex, which typically I buy those, but since it's you, we're gonna try to get that." Yeah. So 2 things, you're at a Royals playoff game, which you're excited about that, but then on the other end, I'm, so many butterflies and nervousness of that actual process. And back then in 14, we were courthouse steps. So I actually, the next day, I drove by the property, looked at it very meticulously, all that. And fortunately we got the property. So it was a really great experience. And it was a rush. Just like with any home big purchase item that you do, it's a huge rush, which I love. But over time, what I've found is, we have currently 19 properties in our portfolio. What you do, those first couple, we would drive by, we'd walk in them after the purchase. We do a lot of the steps that a non-educated investor would do. But over time, what we've done is, and what we've been comfortable with is letting SBD have the whole process from start to finish. And now I don't even look at the properties. I know where they're at, but it's one of those, if it's coming from SBD, I know it's a great product and just pull the trigger without even thought now. It's one of those now where, we get the property and it's an automatic yes for us.
That's awesome. Cool experience. What has your process been like as far as leverage? Talk to us a little bit about, let's do a talk about banking. So who do you bank with? What's that experience been like? And do you put them on aggressive amortization schedules to get those things paid off? Or are you a 30-year fixed guy? What kind of leveraging have you done to date?
Yeah, I think banking relationships are just as important in the process, I believe, than anything else. Whether it's insurance or property management, your banking relationships will help your company tenfold. What we do is, in relationships, just like anything, change over time, and so does banking in general, and rates and whatnot. So we have 4 different banking institutions that we work with: UMB, Bank 21, UBT, and Community America. And we use each of those where needed, where it makes the most sense for our business. And on the banking side, and we'll get into this more, Mark, but I try to be as aggressive as possible on the amortization schedule, just because the quicker you can get to paying off that note is just going to catapult your company into the next phase and the next area of growth.
No, love that.
Yeah.
As you know, just finished the book and it just launched and it's been getting good feedback. One of the things that was clarity for me in there was trying to help explain to people one of the biggest myths in real estate that I believe is that these properties cash flow even when they're leveraged. And yeah, they do around 250, 300 bucks a month, and that's all fine. But you're not going to get wealthy off of that cash flow. The whole goal is to scale up as much as possible, getting to that 20 or 30 properties in general, where your asset column is large, and then aggressively powering down that debt to get them all paid off. Because until the properties are fully paid off, it's really insignificant cash flow. The Saucier family is not going to be, juiced over getting, a couple of $1,000s a month of passive income. However, once it becomes $20,000 a month of passive income, that's when it's like, okay, now we have options. Now, maybe, and again, this is maybe a discussion point, but have you thought about what that looks like for you? I mean, I know you love what you do and you're a young guy, but have you thought about your exit strategy? Do you plan on retiring a little earlier than most? Does that excite you? Or do you have a job that affords you the flexibility where you can kind of keep a portfolio and still kind of take your foot off the accelerator pedal? As far as aggressively pursuing your vocations, your typical vocation, your job, and pursuing really going hard at it to keep on, booking more clients and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm going to go back a little bit. You mentioned the active cash flow on a monthly basis. We've been doing this for six years now, which is still early in the process. I mean, in my opinion, I think we're still early in the process. And if you're really looking at $300 in cash flow per property and focused in on that, you're focused on the wrong thing. That's I would equate doing something like that to looking at your 401k once a month and seeing what the balance is. You need to just actively just acquire properties, let your team do a good job managing those assets and keeping your tenants happy, and focus on the bigger picture and focus on the long term. Not get caught up in the minutia of the small details on a monthly basis. And then going back to, really good segue, Mark. Good question. Our long-term focus on this, like I'd mentioned, right now we have about 19 properties, and we look to acquire 3, possibly 4 a year. Just depending upon the marketplace and conditions. And I mean, if the marketplace changes like it was in the mid 2010s, I'll buy 20 a year if it goes back to that, because that was I don't want to call it a wild west, but it was very buyer friendly. So if something like that were to happen again, by all means, we'll be more aggressive. But right now, 3, 4 makes sense. And then if you extrapolate that on a 10-year basis, that's 30, 40 properties built upon the 19 that we have right now. That's a really good portfolio. We're all trying to catch up to you, Mark. So that's our goal. But going a step further than that, I had a really good conversation last week. My son, his name's Zach. He's about 10 years old. He was asking about our company it's called JDS Financial. And so he was just inquisitive of, what does that do? He knows that we have some properties that we manage, and he knows that people live in those properties, but he was like drilling down more of, okay, how do you collect rent? Where does that come from? What do you do with the rent? And so I kind of walked him through the entire process of the tenant, from the rent to the mortgage. And so it was really neat. He goes, so basically the tenant is paying your mortgage for you? I'm like, buddy, the light just went on. And so that was smile on my face when that happened. So you could see it clicked for him that he was like, okay, so you're going to have a tenant pay your mortgage for you off, and then you're going to own that property when the note comes up. And so that was great. For us, our portfolio, we love having a diversified portfolio with real estate, and we're not dependent upon our real estate portfolio. It's a great divestiture to have. But what we're really trying to do is leave a legacy for our family. Going back, growing up, we were probably middle class. We weren't poor by any means, but it wasn't a situation where there was a legacy plan in place. So, with what we're doing, and me and my wife, Jenna, we really want to leave a legacy behind. And I keep saying that word a lot, but it means a lot to us. And what I mean by that is you want to have something for your kids to where they can have a solid foundation for the future. But even more so than that, you want to have a foundation for your grandkids and then their kids. If you can build it now and build it right, the process just keeps multiplying over years and years. And that way, over decades, you have something really built up right. And to be able to do that now, and kind of be the foundation for that, it means a lot to our family.
Oh, mate, that's sage advice right there. I hope everyone grasps that. The legacy play is something that I'm very passionate about. And again, we like to work with investors of like-minded, that have that long-term mindset. But boy, you hit it in the nail on the head there, man. You're changing your family tree, and that's very special. It's not something that you can save up all of your eggs in one basket and then one day say, okay, I want to be all in on real estate. I think back, when you first started here, we were talking about how it's the long play. Real estate is a crock pot business, right? Not a microwave business. It's like we're getting wealthy slowly over time.
Correct.
But, for full credit that you recognize that at an early age. So, you start investing even when you're in your 30s. And so now by the time you're in your 50s, you're going to have, tens of properties that are, fully paid off and cash flowing and again, with that mindset of leaving a legacy, very powerful. You mentioned talking to your son. If I may, I remember my dad very rarely talking about money. Did your dad at all talk about finances growing up, or did he, was he one who impacted financial wisdom on you, or is that kind of not a talked about topic?
No, it was really taboo in the house. It was one of those, you don't talk about it. You don't talk to your friends about it, and you keep it very quiet. And that built on to college and post-college. But then meeting people such as yourself and being able to open up. And it's interesting because you associate with like-minded people, and it's not, you're not trying to brag or anything like that, but you're bouncing ideas off people, and you're trying to collectively, come up with the same concepts and the same end result for your friends and your family. So it is good now, but my family, we never talked about that. It was something that it just was never mentioned. So,
and they don't mention it in schools. I do believe, and again, I feel I think there's some people, I know Dave Ramsey tries to get some financial education planning done in the schools, and more power to him. But I do believe that the school districts in general are doing a very poor job of educating our children on finances. And I think we do need to talk about it more with our children. I certainly, have had some interesting conversations with my children as well about money. One of those was when we're driving in the car, and Jackson one day was just trying to figure out, I think we were driving home from practice in the middle of a day or maybe a tournament, but it was a weekday. And he said, Daddy, when mommy goes to work, she gets paid. But if she doesn't go to work, she doesn't get paid, correct? I said, yeah, that's right. And he said, but do you get paid even when you're not at work because you own the business? And I'm like, yes, I do. And then suddenly he's understanding that basic concept of, trading time for dollars versus, passive income. And, it's those kind of moments, and then playing games like cash flow and Monopoly, and, just trying to get them to learn a little bit more about money at an early age and how it works. Is pretty powerful. I think, as parents, in general, we do a poor job of really talking about it. But when you have those moments like you had with Zach, that's really special, man. That's cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, growing up in high school, you took an accounting class maybe. And then in college, you took one investment class, which really talked about,
the stock market,
averaging, stuff like that. That really doesn't play. I mean, was really poor. So yeah, I mean, there should be better equipped or educational services out there within the school systems to do even a personal finance type of a class or curriculum of some sort. It's such a valuable product within everyone's individual life that I'm surprised doesn't get brought up. We talk about history all the time. Well, what about individual finance? It's a good point.
What are your thoughts on the turnkey approach to investing? Was there a hurdle you had to jump over to realize that, hey, instead of me going out and getting a deal and buying something cheap and then rehabbing it, I'm just now going to just say, hey, look, I will take the fully remodeled house. It's already got a tenant in there. Just put my 20% down, turnkey. How's that been for you? What's that experience been like? And was that a mindset shift for you when you went away from like more of an active, hey, we're going to rehab it and there's going to be some risk, but I'll take a little bit of equity, as opposed to just, hey, just sell me a house when, let me know when everything's perfect and the tenants moved in, and then I'll buy it.
Yeah. And, I tell people that, back in 2014, when we first started, we were pretty spoiled because you could get, back in 14, you could get a house on the courthouse steps for, let's say 50, you put 20 into it. So you're in it for 70. It appraises at 100. You take out 80 and you use that $10,000 extra for the next deal.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, you were getting, I don't want to call it a free house, but you could get virtually a house for no money invested out of pocket for that property. And those days are not here anymore. So we were pretty spoiled back then. But having said that, we've had, a number of properties where you'd buy for 50. Oh, wait, we have a foundation issue, or, oh, wait, we have this issue down the road. So in going back in concert with talking about, doing it right and setting up a long-term asset, we started in the process before the turnkeys of, all right, let's make sure we have a new HVAC in there, because a lot of the property management calls that we would have dealt with HVAC. So let's be proactive in getting that done right. So in the future, we didn't have to have those problems down the road. Secondly, was roofs. We want to make sure that the roof was proper. And then lately, carpet is such a money pit for investors that the new vinyl flooring systems are so durable and long lasting that it makes more sense on a long-term basis to go with that. So things like that that we were looking at before turnkey came about, we were looking at anyway. So when the full turnkey came about, it actually makes more sense in the long term because you already have a finished product with no surprises when renovation comes. And the beauty of it, you have a tenant in there as well. So that's nice too, because we've had some properties where, you buy it, you renovate it, and then it sits for 2 months, and then you're losing income right there just out of the gate. So the turnkey is nice on that basis because you already have cash flow first month.
Yeah, for those that aren't aware, SBD used to have, when the courthouse steps still had deal flow, and that's largely gone by the wayside. But when we could buy direct on the courthouse steps, an investor would put up all cash on the day. So it'd be, hey, Dwayne, wire $120,000 today. And be like, okay. So you'd take the asset down sight unseen, and then you'd walk inside and see what you got. And hopefully it'd be, as accounted for, you put 20, 30 into it, it's worth 180 or whatever the math was. We would buy an active turnkey model, meaning the investor would go and they would buy all cash up front and then leverage on the back end. Obviously those days are gone.
Yes.
No more courthouse steps auction deals. And so for the last couple of years, we've just been doing all full turnkey, which means that, SBD is responsible for taking the asset down, rehabbing it, and we only sell it to our investors after it's been rehabbed and is rented out. Dwayne, talk a little bit about the property management side of things. How often do you log into your web portal? What kind of reports do you look at? And how responsive is the PM team? How important do you feel that property management is to the turnkey operation for your company?
It's vital. It is vital. I would probably say I'm maybe more hands-off when it comes to the PM, just because I would say SBD does such a good job on, if matters do come up that need my attention, we get the phone call. I'll get the call from your office, and I'm like, okay, how much is this going to be? But it's good because we are taking a proactive approach when it comes to the property management model. I would say that, starting out, I would be more active on looking at type of action items. If open ticket items were out there, I was monitoring those items. But it came to the point where it's like, I know SBD is doing a great job, so why am I trying to manage this process when I really can't? And it's why am I micromanaging something that I really don't need to be? I can be as passive as I want to in this situation, and I know it's going to work out good. So, and I think that's a personal deal with me, that sometimes you got to let go and you got to let people do their jobs, knowing they're going to do it right. And so that's taken, on a personal basis, that's been great for me too, to be able to let that go. I tell people, I probably spend, this sounds bad, but I probably spend 10 minutes a month looking at the sheets, and I'm looking at maybe delinquencies or vacancies. That's about it. I mean, it's very handy.
This may be a loaded question, seeing I haven't checked beforehand, but do you have any vacancies right now out of 19 properties? What kind of vacancies do you have, and how has it been managed through the COVID-19 process?
Through the COVID-19 has been excellent. I'll give you some credit. You were very proactive in that process and got ahead of it really well, and especially with communication. That was key. We were getting weekly communication from your team, and so it was almost too much to where it was. We knew all steps throughout the process, which was great. So, and through the COVID pandemic, from a tenant basis, we really haven't been impacted too much. Out of the 19 properties, we have 2 vacancies. And the 2 vacancies that we have are from the first property we ever bought 6 years ago. So, and it was one of those deals where we knew, so the first deal we ever had was a duplex, and one half of the duplex was already vacant, was already occupied. And that person had been there for a long time, didn't want to mess with anything. So it was kind of a great situation to where half of your property is already accounted for. And so then we renovated the other half and put a tenant in there, and who's been there for the last 6 years. So it was one of those things. It was great. It's a great situation. But we knew, we knew down the road that those tenants were going to leave and that we'd have to reinvest into the property. And so that's happening now, which is great. Some people look at that as a negative, like, oh crap, oh no, that, my tenants are out and I have to renovate this property and put money into it. Well, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it as, great, I get to reinvest into this asset in order to get more money out on a monthly basis for the long term. So there's two ways of looking at it. So that's where we're at right now. And through going back to the banking relationships, those have been key as well throughout the COVID process. Some banks have really stepped up and deferred some payments, and also also offered interest only payments as well. And we jumped on the opportunity to do both of those. And the thought process behind that was to store away some cash. Not that the business needed it or anything, but if we can defer payments for 3-6 months, okay, great. And then take that cash, buy more properties, or take that cash and reinvest it back into that duplex. So that's the way that this situation's played out in the last couple of months.
So just to be clear, during this whole COVID-19 nonsense, when tenants were, saying, "Oh, don't pay rent," and that we shouldn't have to pay rent, and and again, not so much in Kansas City, but certainly nationally, there was obviously some question, and then those legitimate people that were obviously affected by it. Your cash flow increased during that time period?
Correct. It did.
Amazing.
It did. Yeah.
Awesome.
Actually. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, look, that's powerful stuff. Love those stories. You mentioning the duplex. Again, back in the day when we would buy in these properties, you took on that one that was kind of occupied on one side. We called that a rent back, meaning that there was a tenant in place and we're just going to rent it back to the existing tenant. And that kind of speaks to the heart of, the company as well as our investor base, that, look, we're not trying to kick people out of their homes. If there was, an opportunity, I know that you were able to give her a discounted rental rate. I mean, I think on one side of the duplex, you're getting like $995. And then on the other side of the duplex, I think you'd given her like $600 or something, right? It was like, whatever the numbers were, it was like something crazy discounted just to say, hey, look, we're not going to come in there and completely renovate it, but we won't boot you out. You can just stay there as long as you want, and as long as you can pay that. I think eventually obviously that was a ticking time bomb. So it sounds like she finally removed herself and now you got to go in there and renovate it. But again, now you get to jump it up, put some money into it, and now you'll have an increased cash flow. Correct.
And I think the rent backs you tell me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think they're pretty rare in the marketplace.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've had one, within the duplex that worked out pretty good. I mean, she was a tenant for 6 years, which is, if you look at the life expectancy of a tenant, 6 is probably on the high end. But we've had some rent backs that didn't go so well, where we bought the property from the previous owner. They wanted to stay there. And so, it always doesn't work out because there's a reason that person can't afford the property. And so we've had some other experiences with rent backs too. So,
let's talk about some of your negatives. I mean, we can sit here all day and brag about how great we are. What are some of the things that people need to know if they're going to invest in real estate? I always say vacancy and maintenance are the two biggest killers of cash flow. And I'm sure you've had over 6 years, you've had your experience of a little bit of vacancy, a little bit of maintenance, extra maintenance that you probably were like, ugh. Talk about like your process, your mindset, your how you factor on that. What do you plan? What do you budget? Do you keep some money aside? How, making sure that doesn't impact you personally. Talk about a few of those stories of headaches and how they were overcome and how that impacted you.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there. You got to budgeting. You got to personally budget, allocate certain amounts for certain situations. And the first one that I experienced my first year was taxes, because I was used to the process of getting a mortgage, having an escrowed for insurance and taxes, and then come November, here comes the tax bill. Okay, great. Just have it go through, then the bank is going to pay the taxes. No. On a commercial side, they typically don't escrow for the taxes. So you do have to budget accordingly for your property tax on an annual basis to cover your annual property tax. And so that took some time for me to kind of get my mind around that process. And SBD does a great job of using, hey, instead of having to save a pot of cash for those taxes, SBD does a great job of using your rent roll for the month of November or December, whatever makes sense in your portfolio, to cover that expense to where you're not, not paying your taxes or anything like that. So that was like, year one, I was kind of like, well, hold on, what are we talking about here? So that took a little time to get used to. Some of the headaches or frustrations I would say would be, and there's nothing to safeguard against this. It just happens. And if you know this going into the process, and for when it happens to you, you're not going to be surprised, but it's going to be people just being delinquent and leaving the property. There are people out there that will skip out on rent and just leave in the middle of the night, and that happens. Can you collect those rents from that person? The likelihood is not that great. But if you know that going in and you're not shocked and shaken for when that happens to you, it is better. It's better to know that, beforehand as opposed to when it happens to you. And then you also have vandalism. I've had a couple of properties that have been hit by vandals, and that happens too. But, you have insurance in place for stuff like that for when it happens. And, me being in the insurance industry, you got to figure out, all right, do we want to use this insurance product to cover that loss? Does it make sense from a cost basis? So, those are probably the three things that really, when we talk about steady cash flow and building equity, I mean, it's not all puppy dogs and ice cream. I mean, there are some drawbacks to the portfolio process when it comes to, delinquencies, vandalism, stuff like that. I mean, it's not all sunshines and rainbow.
Absolutely. No, dude, great. I mean, vandalism, delinquency, vacancy. I mean,
yeah.
And these are all these are all things that scare people off. So, would you do it all over again if you had to?
Me? Oh, absolutely. I would do double if I could go back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's testimony right there.
Without question.
I think it's like you said, it's about budgeting, right? So for those out there that are thinking, how do I get into it? Well, look, you have insurance, which covers you for vandalism and theft and roofs and those kind of things. And then you have budget set aside for, say, what would you recommend? Maybe, $1,000 per property to kind of just, have in a slush fund or maybe $5,000 or $6,000 have in your account at all times until you get to a certain, let me ask you this question. You're up to now 19 properties.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like at this point in time, if you have a vacancy, is it just like a blip on the radar? Do you even really notice?
It is. When you're building your portfolio, if you have 5 properties and one of them's vacant, it's going to hurt a little bit more as opposed to 19 and you have, right now I have 2 vacancies. So it's really not, it's a non-issue right now for us on with two. But if you have it's all about maybe a percentage. If you have 5 and you have a vacancy, it's going to hit you a little harder. But yeah, I just set aside, always had like a slush fund of like 15,000 just set aside. And fortunately for us, with cash flow and the performance of the properties, we never even touched it. And it just sits there still.
Yeah, because at this time, even if you had an instance of, something, major, like an AC blows out, you got to spend $2,000. I mean, your cash flow from the properties is easily going to cover that just from 1 month. So you would get a reduced amount of your rental disbursements, but you wouldn't have to. I mean, it's probably been a long time since you've been cash called for any particular, event to do with one of your rental properties.
Correct. I think that happened early in the process when maybe we had 2 or 3 properties. And it is important too when you start building properties and portfolios. And SBD does a great job with this through their team, is identifying, and I want to say this correctly, identifying properties that are always having to have maintenance done on them. And when I say that, it's kind of an 80-20 rule when I think about property management on our portfolio. It seems like, 80% of the houses that we have, we don't hear anything on, but it's that other 20% that we hear the majority of our calls on. So SBD does a great job of identifying, is this a legitimate request, or is this, just something, cosmetic, or something that needs to be addressed or not. So, and I think what we've done a good job in having a larger portfolio in place has helped us to where we had a property that the guy wanted a privacy fence put in, which it's a big cost to us. I mean, it wiped out our entire profit of 2 properties on that one for an entire year, because the privacy fence was like $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
So do I want to buy a privacy fence? No. But in the same sense, we ended up getting a longer term deal done with that tenant because of the privacy fence. So if you look at it on a whole basis, as opposed to just spending $6,000, well, we were able to get that tenant in there for another 2 more years, locked him in. And you have a happy tenant, going forward. So things like that, you really got to not use judgment and not just make a decision, a bad decision quickly on those types of situations too, which is easy to do, when you're building your portfolio.
Seems like your mindset is very long term. Do you feel like that's a key moving forward? Like you have a long term mindset. You're definitely looking at the horizon rather than what's right in front of you. I mean, you see the long game very clearly. Is that something you and Jenna aligned on? Does your wife Jenna, does she see the same thing? Is that something you had to talk about ahead of time, or is it something that you've adopted over time, just realizing, hey, we're in it, we get it? Talk to a little bit about how you guys are able to see that so clearly.
Yeah, I think what helps us do that is going back to 2014 and even before that. And it goes back to what are we trying to accomplish? So if you can identify what you're looking to accomplish with starting a business and having a real estate portfolio, then that helps you down the road of understanding and realizing that this is a long-term play, and not that, hey, we need this $200 per property in cash flow. We need that to pay the rent or buy groceries. If you stick to your mission and your core values of the business itself, it helps you throughout the entire process and the life of the company.
And your vision and mission for your company is to create a legacy for your children of
Absolutely.
a bunch of paid off real estate that provides, constant passive income and cash flow in the future.
Correct. Yeah. And our, even going further down the road is one day, we have three children, and my hope one day is to break up our portfolio with our children and have them start a new company themselves and be able to multiply those properties onto their own company and then keep building their own portfolio as well.
That's awesome. That's going to take a lot of education. I think one of the hardest thing we do is parenting, and along those lines, teaching children about money. When so much of the world, as you know, is just a buy now, pay later mentality, teaching them to go against the grain and not be normal, because we know normal is broke. It takes a lot. And I think that's going to be a constant challenge for us as we raise our young children, to be mindful that the world is teaching them incorrectly, and we have to try and, give them the right mindset on that.
Yeah. And I think education and showing them the process of what we do and how we do it. I can't imagine if I was growing up and knew what I know now, how invaluable that of a tool that would be way back when. These kids are pretty fortunate.
Dude, one of the questions I had for you is that, if you could talk to your younger self, let's say when you're 25 years old, what would you kind of tell yourself to accelerate your financial learning curve? Do you feel like you would have done things differently or just sooner?
Sooner, absolutely. I think, I'm trying to think here, do some fast math here. 6 years ago. So I would have been in my mid 30s when we started doing business with SBD housing. I wish would have done that at your inception when you first started business. I mean, the quicker, and I say that, I mean, because the quicker that you can start the process, the easier it is down the road. Because, most young professionals, and I say young professionals, you don't have to be a young professional to have a real estate portfolio. Anyone can have a real estate portfolio. It's not just predetermined or predefined by your profession. It's just a product of knowing what to do and how the system works and being able to identify key assets within a portfolio. But anyway, the sooner that you can start that process, it just multiplies on itself to be able to build a portfolio. So then down the road, you're using those assets to actually keep building the company.
Yeah, I believe, frame it up for us. Let's say that you have someone who's in their mid 30s and is listening and they say, man, real estate, I've never considered it just because it's going to be such a hassle. Frame it up for them. What is the timeline? What is that horizon? Do you feel like you're on about a 15-year horizon to get where a good number? And I'm not saying you need to stop buying or whatever. I mean, I know once you get to that point, it's like, heck, I've got this many, I might as well keep going if it's hassle free. But I mean, initially, did you kind of see it as a 10 to 15-year time frame? And as you said, you were aggressively amortizing your loans to pay them down. Is it a 10 to 15-year timeline, or do you feel like it's more 20 to 25 as far as, getting to that end goal of having a bunch of paid off properties?
Yeah. I mean, obviously as soon as possible, right? On the amortization of those loans, as soon as possible. When that happens, that's great. But I mean, I think you and I are you and I have the same personality when it comes to that. When we get to a certain number, whatever it is, it's probably not going to be enough. And so that number is going to jump by another 15 or 20. And let's just be honest, it's never going to be enough. So, let's say I say, oh, let's get to 60, it's going to be 100. It's going to keep going. And we have that personality, which is great, to where it's, you kind of get to a point, but all right, let's keep going. And the process is very simple. And we have it down now. I mean, just like with anything, you have experience, you have knowledge, you know the pitfalls, to where it becomes easier at this point, 6 years in, and that's not that long of a time, 6 years, to where now, I mean, it's just the only thing that we have to do as a company is have SBD find the property and you purchase it. I mean, it really is, with talking about, to a younger person, when's the timeline? Do it now. I mean, the sooner you do it, the easier it is going to be, 6 years down the road.
And trust the process, right? I mean, it's just,
absolutely.
Hey, the quality assets that you can buy from a turnkey provider, whether it be SBD or anybody, if you have a good turnkey provider that's spitting out quality product, and I will add, has dialed in property management, that's the key to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, because as we mentioned, the two biggest killers of cash flow are vacancy and maintenance. And those two deal breakers that will, cause you to have a strain on your cash flow, both are determined largely by the proficiency of your property management team. They can certainly reduce vacancy, and by finding better quality tenants, by keeping them through negotiation and knowing when to push rents up, as well as knowing when to say, hey, this person should probably be locked in for a longer term. Let's just keep that property occupied. And then maintenance, making sure that we, obviously hold tenants accountable to tenant chargeable offenses. If some kids flush a toy down the toilet, let's hold them accountable to paying for that rather than just dumping it on the owner. Good property management goes a long way. Dwayne, do you have any? Yeah, sorry, go ahead, mate.
No, I mean, you spend so much time and effort in the process of building up the asset. I mean, why let it fall or walk out the back door if you don't have good property management?
100%. Hey, so since this process has been going for you and you're obviously doing well, kudos, 19 properties is awesome. How has your mindset changed towards the stock market? How do you view that? And do you have much wealth in the stock market still? And what is your view to the stock market?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably what my approach has been throughout this entire process is to have, you talk about diversification. I try to be diversified within real estate and in the marketplace. So I would probably say I'm probably at 50-50 within real estate and in the stock market right now. And, it's one of those things where, do I check my balances, once a month? No, but I just know it's there. And I know I have good professionals similar to SVD. I know I have good professionals doing their job and doing it, and looking out for me and my family's best interest. So I don't, I think it doesn't hurt to have a good, backup plan or a good mix of assets with stocks. But, right now or in the last couple of months, people get so preoccupied with the highs and lows of the market and what's going on with that, where my mindset's a little bit different because I think of it as a long-term play. I'm not actively trading stocks or day trading or anything like that. I'm not buying Bitcoin or anything like that, to where it's more of a long-term play. So I don't really get affected, or I try not to be affected by those ups and downs in the marketplace.
How's your tax situation been impacted by owning rental properties? Has it been a positive, a negative, a neutral?
It has. It's been positive. It has. It's allowed us, and I'll be completely transparent with you. I'm probably not the most aggressive investor when it comes to using the business to its full capacity from a tax standpoint. I'm probably a little scared, if you will, when it comes to that. But there has been a good amount of income from the business that we're able to use expenses towards to offset our tax liabilities, which has been great.
And the depreciation expense, obviously, of all the properties to offset some income, right? You're W-2'd or
that's the biggest thing. Yes, I'm a W-2, so that definitely helps us offset that. The depreciation is just massive, and I'm not an accountant by any means, but I mean that in itself is just worth it to have the properties from a tax standpoint.
So, mate, really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like we've covered many points? Is there anything that you want to add on to someone who is potentially thinking about jumping into real estate that has not taken the hurdle yet? What would you say to someone that's in a similar situation to you? Obviously, high income, high net worth, but, never dabbled in real estate. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is if you have the feeling or the thought of you want to do it, you're probably a little bit too late. So, and when I say that is, if you're like, hey, I really want to get in real estate, you should already be in it. So, you want to be aggressive and plan early as opposed to missing that opportunity. We were talking about, what made us want to jump into real estate. It was the fear that we would miss out on a lifetime opportunity. And so I'm so glad that me and my family did that, because I have a lot of friends and a lot of clients that learn about our business and said, man, I really wish I'd have done that way back when. I hear that all the time. So my advice would be is don't be that person that says, I wish I'd have done that. Just go ahead and start the process. And
the old adage that the best day to buy a piece of real estate was yesterday. The second
Correct.
best day is today, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite quotes you love to live by? Any pearls of wisdom that guide you in your investing career?
Not so much in the investing career, but yes.
Don't give me your movie quotes. I want something that's more investment related.
That's good. That's good. I have two that I tell myself a lot, and it's one of those things, maybe not from an investment standpoint, but more just a overall life. The first one is, it's never as bad as you think it is, nor is it as good as you think it is either. And what I mean by that, and I kind of came up with that myself, just thinking, don't let the highs get you too high and don't let the lows get you too low, because, the next day something could happen to turn it around. So, we all have those days where like, man, nothing's going right. And then we also have those days where we're flying high. And so I think just knowing that, and I say that to myself every once in a while, is just know that, it's not going to get too low and it's not going to get too high. And that way you kind of ground yourself as well.
Love that.
Yeah. The second one is, I was probably, maybe 23 years old. And I was with a client, and we're in Minnesota, and we're leaving a client's office, and we're driving down the road, and I'm driving the rental car. And I probably had my foot on the gas pedal too fast. And here comes the cop. And I have a client in the car with me. So I'm trying to be, pretty even keeled, but I probably wasn't. And so I get the ticket, keep driving down the road, and I'm just, I'm pissed and just driving down the road. He's like, and the client looks at me and he goes, "Dwayne, if that's the worst thing that happens today, that's okay." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" He's like, "Dwayne, you got a ticket. It's not that big of a deal." He goes, "You could have a lot worse things going on in your life than that." And it really struck me. And that was probably 17 years ago. Because it kind of goes back to hey, a lot of people have a lot of tough things going on. So you got to take everything in perspective. And I think we lose track of that sometimes in life, and with everything going on in our lives and in our world. Perspective is something that we lose sometimes. And so I kind of think of that situation in that moment to kind of teach myself that, hey, you got a pretty good life, be appreciative of it.
Dude, you've got a great life. I look up to you as a father, and truly as a husband, father, friend. Thank you for doing this today. It's super
Absolutely,
fun. Love doing a bit of a deep dive with you. And thanks for being, one of our favorite clients. We love serving you and your family, and love to be on this legacy journey with you. It's been really interesting. I've loved hearing stories about Zach and your kids, and knowing that you're going to be changing their lives through what you're doing here at SBD. So thanks, mate.
yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. We certainly appreciate you, and appreciate the SBD family and everything you've done for us, and allowed us the opportunity to create our company and a legacy for our family. We appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. We'll do it.
All right, thank you. All right, buddy.
You're listening to Mistake-Free Real Estate Radio, the authority in passive real estate investing. No late-night calls, no clogged drains, no tenant nightmares. Take the passive investor's approach to real estate investing and trust a turnkey professional. Learn more at mistakefreerealestate.com. Until next time, remember, you don't get rich from what you earn, you get rich from what you own.